that's one of the only the two times in my life where I've genuinely thought I'm about to die. What if I could combine a career as a medic, as having a trade which is so valuable and so meaningful in the world, combine that with something that you love, which is adventure and outdoors.
Welcome to The Conversation. On today's episode of Trailblazers, Johnny is speaking to Dr. Will Duffin, Joint Medical Director at World Extreme Medicine and a film and TV expedition medic. We hope you enjoy the episode and be sure to subscribe.
So Will, lovely to have you. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. Obviously, knowing a little bit of your background from World Extreme Medicine and some of the other amazing work that you've done. For those that may not be familiar with yourself, would you mind giving us a little bit of a refresher into what you've been up to, your background, and some of the amazing stuff that you've got going on?
Sure thing. Yeah. So I'm a jobbing NHS GP. That's my main job. But I've got a side hustle in something called extreme medicine. I suppose I should probably explain what that is. Really, it's wherever humankind goes, whether that's deep into a jungle, high into a mountain, or in the great expanse of ocean, or trying to colonize Mars. It's really it's about science, health, adventure at the edge, and it's healthcare in these kind of dangerous, remote places, committed by brave and committed professionals, and it's this kind of world that I've kind of entered into that I'm quite passionate about, and I would describe myself as an extreme medic. I've had the great fortune to have done some unusual, shall we say, medical gigs over the course of my career so far, and I have to say that as someone working the frontline NHS has really kept me energized. And I've seen that same thing happen to other colleagues who are doing some of this interesting work, and the benefits, that reciprocal benefits that brings not just to them, but to the patients they care for in extreme environments and back home in their ward or their clinic. And I'm just quite passionate about it. And I suppose my what I do at the moment is I work with the World Extreme Medicine. I'm their Joint Medical Director, and I help organize our conference. We have an international conference every year. We bring all these different kind of characters together under one roof. We run lots of courses around the world with jungle, polar, desert medicine. It's really, really cool stuff. And we provide medical cover. And part of that is I'm the on-screen doctor for an American reality TV show,
Wow.
which has been a crazy ride. And I've got lots more kind of things in the pipeline that are being planned. So it's, if you like, it's a medical career, but an unconventional one.
I mean, I absolutely love that. How did you find yourself involved in World Extreme Medicine? I don't imagine it's on the syllabus or the curriculum as you're studying your.
Yeah, none of these things are they? Well, I think the first thing for me that happened was I when I left school, I went on a 3-month expedition to Costa Rica and Nicaragua. And then I went traveling around Central America for 5 months. And I just got really obsessed with this just travel and adventure and opening your eyes. And it's one of those really formative moments in your life, isn't it? When you go out and your eyes are just opened from having just done GCSEs and A-levels to get into med school. Honestly, you have to graft so hard with all your exams. And when you look up from the textbooks and you see what's out there and you think, wow, what if I could combine a career as a medic, as having a trade which is so valuable and so meaningful in the world, combine that with something that you love, which is adventure and outdoors. And that's where it kind of, that set me on this trajectory. And once I'd done I did a bit of ED training, lived out in Australia. Then I came back to the UK, did some GP training. And then I ended up doing some commercial trekking and charity challenges as the doctor. Involved going to really cool places like up Kilimanjaro, over into the Andes, the northern China. I've been to Madagascar. I've got a stint as a private doctor on a luxury Trans-Siberian train.
Wow.
And then my wife and I, we went out to Myanmar for 6 months and did some humanitarian work out there with UNICEF. And so we did all this, and that was kind of setting the stage. And then I realized that I wasn't the only person, of course, doing this. There was a whole community of other, we call extreme medics, that were having these alternative medical careers, and the home of that really is this organization called World Extreme Medicine. And I actually saw them advertise on Facebook. Many great things begin with a Facebook post. Yeah, you can waste a lot of time on social media, but there's also some good stuff does come out of it. And I just applied. They were looking for a doctor to help out with one of their media projects, and I applied through Facebook and got offered to go to a selection weekend in the Peak District. Went on that, and then got the job, and then it kind of went from there, really.
Goodness me. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I've got so many questions. What was you mentioned some of the applicability of the stuff that you've learned, and, having that broader exposure to, to the world and to the things that you're seeing. What are some of the biggest lessons and carryovers or things that you were just blown away by that you've taken back from your many adventures so far?
Yeah. I think I've just come back to this concept of reciprocal benefits. And this is it's a massive theme for anyone involved in disaster relief, humanitarian, military, expedition medicine, wilderness medicine, all of that stuff. Is you learn so much in those environments as a medic that you can then bring back to your usual place of work, whether that's a conventional clinic, ward, operating theatre. And I think there's so many things I could bring into this. But for me, probably the biggest thing I've learned is the ability to deal with unforeseen events when you're out in uncontrolled environments. So if you're operating, say, in the jungle or a war zone, or say on a train moving through Eastern Siberia, wherever it is, things just happen when you're not ready. Kit fails, people get suddenly ill, the whole kind of expedition suddenly falls into jeopardy. Some of your vehicles fall through the ice. There's all manner of things that just happen, and you just kind of learn to just deal with that, to not be too reactive, to just take a moment to compose yourself, to formulate a new plan and move forwards, and you just make the best out of that situation. So that's a really key skill, and I think that's transferable not just within the NHS, because as a GP, that the same things kind of happen, but on a much lower, and it's fortunately not on quite a dramatic level. And you just find yourself you just have this equanimity, this composure that you can only get from being in those environments. And that you can then transfer not just in your professional life, but also hopefully your personal life. Having said that, I can't say in an argument with my wife, I'm always the most composed, but I'm working on it.
I think there's so much in terms of lessons from that experience that you've taken. I definitely am not the most composed, so you're not on your own in those heated situations when it's an added layer of extra personal stuff on there. It's different. I think it's a slightly different situation, but when you're dealing with those extreme circumstances, triaging a patient when you're at the foot of a mountain, or maybe in some cases with yourself halfway up or 3/4 of the way up, and being equipped with those skills to, as you say, kind of like take that pause, take that moment, really assess the situation and respond accordingly. Yeah. There's so much in that, and those lessons that you carry with you into the other facets of the healthcare system. It's incredible, and it sounds like there's a role for you to play, potentially even at some point in the future, passing on some of those skills to aspiring young minds.
Well, I try and see it. It's more of a skill share, I suppose, and that's when we've been running this conference. It's bringing these minds together and really trying to steward some of that energy and share some of that learning, because everyone's got something to learn from each other. And it's a very diverse arena. There's just it amazes me just how many different people are doing these things. So, for example, I've got a colleague called Glenn Singleman, who's an ED doctor in Australia. And if that's not enough for you, he's also a high altitude skydiver. He's been to the bottom of he's been to the Titanic with James Cameron. And he's mountaineered. He's climbed up all these huge peaks and base jumped off them. And then there's Jan Bakker, she's a midwife, but also a qualified pilot. And she does these kind of helicopter missions out in Tanzania for outreach clinics. And these are just two examples. But you come to this conference we organise, you just see these. On the one hand, they are ridiculously overachieving individuals. You read their CVs, and honestly, it's obscene. But they're also very passionate and committed professionals who, and the real spark that I try and get from them is they've really chosen they've chosen to break the mold. They've chosen to break out of the conventional medical paradigm. And this is something I see a lot with medical training, whether that's as doctors, nurses, paramedics, is it's very linear, it's hierarchical. Sorry, it's very linear, very hierarchical, very constrained by rules. There's lots of box ticking, lots of exams, lots of, and it produces this kind of identikit clinician, which serves the system because patients expect to have a high standard from their clinicians. But the flip side is that it squeezes out any potential entrepreneurialism. It squeezes out a lot of the dreams and aspirations and individualism that I think that enable people to actually go and do more interesting and more worthwhile and rewarding things in their careers.
Yeah, I mean, the passion that you talk about with this stuff as well is just amazing, Will. I'm blown away by that, and I think that's evident for anyone that's watching this. I think it almost seems like, actually, and this is an open question, would in your mind, students that are coming through and those training in the medical field, would they benefit from even something like this as part of their training, to go out to these places, to see a broader healthcare picture as it pertains to the world, and not just the system that they're, slotting into, as you say, and checking those boxes? Do you think that would be something that would benefit people?
200%. And this is the whole premise of medical electives in medical school. There's the opportunity to go out and have some of these kind of mind-opening experiences, to work overseas and see how clinics work in low-resource settings, etc. But I think once you've exited medical school, or your kind of undergraduate training, and you enter the real workplace, for me, this is where the barriers really start to creep in. And many of my colleagues, particularly working in acute specialties, they are beholden to very regimented work patterns, very antisocial hours, rota patterns. There's often skeleton staffing, and there's other pressures in life that creep in. You've got to pay the mortgage. You may have dependents like young children, or sick parents, etc. There's loads of things. There's very valid reasons why people, I think, struggle to get away and diversify their career. And there's also barriers within the individual as well. And I think some of those are around just not knowing that that's even out there. I think we all get kind of stuck in this little rut. And we're just good little workers, and we get our head down, and then we just sit and do that job for 40 years. And then we wake up suddenly at the end of it and think, hang on a second, what was that all about? And I'm terrified of that moment. I'm always thinking, when I does come to the point when I retire, I want to be able to look back and think, yeah, I really made a go of it, and I did something I could be proud of.
I'm certain that's going to be the case, mate. I have no doubt about that, as I say. And it's interesting that you bring up the awareness piece, because I think that is one of those challenges that I know you saw the advert on Facebook and thought, what's that about? What do you think could be done to raise the profile of extreme medicine? And even, to be honest with you, that feels like it, whilst it is sort of the case, calling it extreme medicine, it sort of does it a disservice. It's almost that it feels like, from the way that you describe it and the impact that it can have on the path that someone can take into medicine, like it should almost be a part of the script for them, or the requirement that they get these learnings. What would you like to see in terms of raising the profile, raising awareness, and what could we do to make more people aware of it?
Yeah, I'm glad you're on board with this, Johnny. And I just wish that kind of policymakers and hospital executives saw this in the same way that you do. I think what's difficult is when you take someone away from frontline clinical work in the UK, that is a gap in the system that's not being filled. And there is huge pressure at the moment on service provision. And as you've seen, there's there's lots of striking junior doctors at the moment. The consultants have been striking. The nurses recently striking. It's a really difficult time to be in the medical profession as a clinician. And so these aren't really it's very hard, I think, to for when the NHS is under so much pressure, particularly with additional clinical pressures from winter illnesses like flu, and recently we've had COVID, to create space for what is easily perceived as something which is a little bit surplus. It's a little bit of an adventure. It's a bit of fun. It's a bit of a jolly. It's got a bit of, and like you say, the word extreme in itself makes it sound a little bit like a gimmicky in some ways. But I would like to see more options for frontline workers. One thing we're trying to do with World Extreme Medicine is make people at least aware. You see, the awareness piece, that there is an endless ocean of opportunity and possibility out there in this domain, and you've just got to start opening doors to find it. So there's that thing. People have got to be looking for it in the first place. And then the other thing is around the structures that in which people in the NHS work need to facilitate that. So we need to create a culture where it is okay for people to go on sabbatical. Say in a GP practice, they work within their partnership for, say they do 5 years each, and then each one of them gets a chance to go away for, say, 3 to 4 months and do an voluntary overseas project, or go and do an interesting experience like that. Or in a hospital setting where there's some reciprocal cover. So if someone wants to go and work for UK Med and do some disaster relief, there's backfill to make sure that can be accounted for. But many of my colleagues who do this kind of work, who are in substantive posts, and do you know what, Johnny, this is exactly the reason why I'm self-employed. I'm a locum GP, so it gives me the flexibility. That's why I do that. But most people aren't in that situation. They are in substantive posts, but there just needs to be more provision within the system for those people in substantive roles to take that time out, to encourage them to do so. Because the big win, this is not just for the patients they serve in whatever extreme medicine project they do, but it's when they come back, it's how much more energized they are, and the skills that they bring back as well. I spoke previously to this adaptability to composure under stressful conditions, but there's so many other skills and attributes that they can then bring back to their usual place of work that will make things better for everyone.
Yeah, and I think from the point of view of a outsider looking in, the system thinking here as well, when you go to these places and you only have a myopic view of the system that you're in, right? So you color every lens with your experience. So going to these other places and seeing how things might work or not work, and the learnings that you can bring back can then inform. And I think one of the things that stands out to me, thinking from the innovation mindset, and where you're going out and providing care in these extreme situations, presumably you're going to be carrying devices or, things that need to be mobile that, potentially once upon a time were much larger. And I think about the innovation cycle. And so as you're providing care and expertise in these places, it has a knock-on effect within the innovation cycle, within the innovation pool, because there's probably places that are quite difficult to get to. So you need to condense technology down into smaller things. And then I think about a broader world view on things where we've got climate change. So things like neglected diseases. So things that you probably are working with and come into contact with on a daily basis when you're doing these out in the extremes. Those are things that I don't think are very cognizant in the public, in the Western world at least, mindset. And so, we have a number of different places where I think we need visibility. That's one of them with neglected diseases, climate change, horizon scanning for pharma. But this type of work provides an opportunity to have boots on the ground, real world feedback that can be played back to create innovations that can really fundamentally shift patient care, provide not just benefit to patients back home, but learning for the physician out there in those places. And it just seems like it's such a boon and such a win. It makes me question, why on earth are we not investing a little bit more into that? Because, as I say, from the innovation cycle perspective, it seems like it has a strong lean into where we might be able to move the needle on that as well.
Yeah, and you're forced to innovate in these environments, in low resource settings. Take, for example, when I went out to Myanmar and we were working in a a neonatal unit in a very low resource setting. They just didn't have any of the equipment. It was actually quite a harrowing experience because every day a newborn baby was dying avoidably because of the lack of equipment and the conditions. There was infection was rife there. And so we were trying to make a positive pressure ventilation for these babies, and we found some resource where you can use oxygen tubing and you can push that in the baby's nose, and then you can create what's called bubble CPAP. And that's an example of how you use some very basic kit to create a more advanced way of caring for this sick infants. That's bubble CPAP. And then treating acute asthma in children, we were using, instead of having an actual proper spacer, we were using Coke bottles and cutting holes in them and putting the inhaler into that. And that's just two examples of where, when you're faced with lower resources and you're in that kind of pressured situation, you have to adapt, improvise, and innovate. And that's as much of a mindset as anything else. I think anyone that's worked out in those situations and then comes back to, say, the NHS, which for all intents and purposes is still a low resource setting in many ways, you complain about it a lot less. You're like, well, actually, this isn't actually so bad. But when you're faced with immense service pressure and you feel under-resourced, you become your most resourceful, because you've worked out how to solve problems in a much more challenging environment. It flows more naturally, and you just bring a level of consciousness and to the problem, and you can solve that. You can work the problem rather than being reactive and complaining and saying, oh, this is all rubbish, the NHS is falling apart. You're like, right, what do we need to do? Why don't we try that? We can do a bit of this, and brilliant, job's done. What's next?
Yeah, absolutely. I think necessity is the mother of invention, as
Exactly.
they say. And it also, in those extreme situations when you're problem solving on the fly, you're using and drawing from experiences that maybe you've read about something in a textbook a long time ago, that suddenly that knowledge becomes completely applicable in that moment. And it's just an ability for you to take that knowledge and then apply it, as you say, when you come back into the healthcare system in the UK or wherever it is you might be from, is a wonderful thing. You mentioned that you are obviously a doctor on a TV show in the US. Tell us a little bit more about that. How did you get involved in that? And I didn't realize I'm talking to a celebrity.
A celebrity amongst the very the super fans of this particular TV show in America. If I spent much time in America, I'm sure eventually someone would recognize me. I'm not going to lie, Johnny, that would be a great moment. I mean, but it hasn't happened yet. Yeah, when I did the job out in Myanmar, and I really thought I was going to get out in the humanitarian world and do something perhaps more arguably worthwhile. But then, somehow I ended up falling into reality TV, and I'm not saving babies' lives, but hey, the American public needs to be entertained. And it's a really interesting job, and actually, to be in all seriousness, it is worthwhile, because when I'm out on this job, it's the longest running reality show in history. It's been running for over 20 years. I'm going out this year to shoot season 48. Season 48.
Wow.
But there's a team of us out there. There's 8 of us in total, and we look after the crew, the contestants, the local villagers on this remote island where it's based. The odd backpacker. We're there as the kind of medical on the ground care for these people, and that's quite fun and different and rewarding. You see lots of interesting pathologies and conditions, and I'm not just helping to lead we run kind of emergency primary care. We have a clinic out there, but I'm also the on-screen doctor, which is quite a whole different challenge again, where I'm on the side of the set during the filming of these challenges for these contestants, and they're all trying to win $1 million US. So there's a lot on the line. They're all starving. They haven't slept. They're filthy. They're all trying to play the game, and they throw themselves into these crazy challenges. For example, they build these big assault courses, and they have to kind of run over them and be first back. And then there's lots of water challenges. One's called Last Gasp, where they put this big grill over the water and then they let the tide come in and the contestant is under the grill like this. And essentially whoever can hold their breath the longest wins the challenge. Some of them are really quite extreme stuff. And obviously as part of this, people do get hurt and injured. And then I'm on the sidelines ready to jump in and do the medical stuff. And the crazy facet is that this is all on camera. So I've treated patients before, in behind closed doors in consultation rooms and things, but to do it in such a public setting, we literally, this is like, it's like a Hollywood movie. There are 30 or 40 different cameras all pointing at the action. There's microphones everywhere. Every single thing is being recorded. And you're not only trying to deliver safe patient care, but you're also interfacing with the host of the show who's trying to tell the story and help the viewer understand what's going on. So it's really where medicine meets storytelling. And it's a really interesting kind of world that I've been involved in. I go out every year for about 6 weeks of the year, and a job that I've really been enjoying.
It sounds utterly incredible. And again, it's another experience, another piece of expertise that you can kind of add to the bow, and also in service of raising awareness for extreme medicine as a discipline and the organization. It strikes me though that there may be, obviously for the purposes of entertainment, that contestants and game show aspect to it is one thing. Would you like to see something potentially come along that might just be more focused on the actual medicine itself and what could be achieved through organizations like World Extreme Medicine and the work that's being done to highlight that in a broader context? So less of a game show vibe type thing, more of a let's go on an adventure, let's see what we can do and bring some of that perspective to this.
That's a great question, Johnny, and it's something that I've been mulling over the last year or so. The reality TV, our role in that as medics, we're very much a supporting role. We're desperately not wanting to be part of the story. We're there just to kind of steward the fun, if you like. But I totally agree. I'd like to see perhaps more factual type programming that really makes the extreme medicine element its focus. And I think there'd be huge public interest in this. It's captivating. It's just this kind of hidden world that not many people know about. People have these kind of preconceptions about medics as being often quite kind of straight-laced, clean cut. We swan around in scrubs and white coats and uniforms, but there's just this whole hidden world of these crazy characters doing interesting jobs like the one I've just described. And I'd love to create some kind of show that brings that out into the light and showcases the brilliance and ingenuity of the work that they do.
Yeah, and it would provide an amazing platform to shine a light on this work, and also probably present an opportunity to shine a light on some of the conditions and in these places that don't get the attention. We previously mentioned neglected diseases. I think these are areas that you would be able to play a massive role in serving with content like that, for sure.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely strikes me as something that would have a lot of benefit, and I see the rise in interest in science-based and evidence-based content. Obviously Andrew Huberman and the work that he's doing, and I think that stuff like that would really be a massive service for the audience that you're looking to serve, inspire the next generation of potentially extreme medics and people going into medicine to provide a pathway for them. What have been some of the most outrageous challenges that you've come up against and working in the field, and how have you overcome those, and what is talk to us a little bit about some of those?
I think the single biggest challenge I faced, which I would definitely class as a near miss, was being involved in a massive bushfire when I was out in Madagascar. I was on an expedition. We were at this in Andringitra National Park, beautiful park in the center of Madagascar, 2,000 meters of altitude. We'd just been spent the whole day trekking up to this plateau. I was in my tent doing a bit of personal admin, and there was this very subtle change in the way the tent was responding to the wind. It was just kind of suddenly the wind had picked up and there was a bit of commotion outside, and I was kind of, oh, what's going on? And a few minutes later, I unzipped the tent and popped my head outside, and all I could see was this. I've never experienced anything like this before or since. Was a wall of fire,
Oh gosh,
marching towards us. And when I first saw it, it was on the horizon, and then only minutes later, it was 500 yards away. It was coming fast. And this was fire started by ranchers outside the park. The wind direction had suddenly caused the fire direction to flip and to come towards us. And it was a plateau, so there was a lot of vegetation that was just very dry, and it went up like a tinderbox. And it was just this. So I was the medic. We had a team of porters on this expedition. We had lots of international trekkers, and it was just pandemonium. I mean, it's one of those moments where you think nothing in life had prepared me to handle that situation.
I can't imagine you're going to have too many bushfires in the UK.
There's no playbook for it. You think, oh, great, I can handle most things. You kind of apply first principles. This was a situation where I literally had nothing to go with, and it was pretty chaotic. And it wasn't me that got us out of that situation. I was very much I think I was a passenger. We tried a few, if they're fairly ineffectual things. We tried to get water from the river and douse it on this little hut that was in the camp as a place to shelter. We tried to actually evacuate camp at one point. Honestly, this all happened over the course of minutes. Things moved very fast. So we grabbed our kit and we ran along the plateau, and then we quickly realized that was not going to work because the width of this thing, there was no ground, there's nowhere that was barren that would have, there's no place of sanctuary. And so then we ended up just kind of hunkering down and just waiting for the end to come. And that's one of only the 2 times in my life where I've genuinely thought I'm about to die. And the thing that saved us was the porters. They managed to burn a controlled fire break around the perimeter of our camp. So they actually had some fuel they were using for cooking, and they lit this arc and burn a kind of 5-meter perimeter around the camp, which prevented the main body of the flames actually entering our camp. And so when the fire came, it actually went over and around us. And there was a lot of smoke, a lot of confusion when the fire came over us. I actually ended up jumping into a small river that was running by. But when we came out, no one was hurt. It was, things were singed, and there was a lot of confusion and thick smoke, but no one was seriously hurt. But, I was the only medical professional at that very remote location. And it could just think of what could have happened if that, how many burns victims and things there could have been to deal with. And the big med kit would have probably gone up in flames as well. It was really terrifying and a very sobering moment, because it reminded me that doing this stuff, yes, it's fun. It's kind of slightly sexy. It's exciting. But the flip side is it's also quite dangerous. There is also a real personal cost to entering into these environments. You have to be aware of that.
Yeah, and that's one of the questions that I was actually going to ask you. Based on those experiences and things that obviously can happen, how do you deal with that with your wife and family back home? How do you communicate to them, or how? Well, I know my wife would certainly have feelings about me saying, "Yeah, I'm just popping off to a place where I might just be in a ring of fire, literal ring of fire." How do you convince them to say, yes, that's good with me?
Yeah, chatting to her on the phone. How's your day, darling? Yeah, I nearly died today. No biggie. All good. I'm fine. Yeah.
Minor case of being singed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my risk tolerance has changed, and actually, I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old now, and the biggest adventure I'm having right now, Johnny, is being a dad. And being around for them. So I'm actually not overseas for that much of the year at the moment. That's probably hopefully going to change when they're a bit bigger. But so I'm away for this TV show for about 6 weeks a year, but I'm generally around for the rest of it. So nowadays I'm not putting myself in risky situations. But it is, I mean, I do ask other extreme medics about this issue, many of whom are also parents, and everyone has loved ones back home. And I think anyone entering into extreme environments has to they have to ask themselves that question. And are they putting themselves at an acceptable level of risk, and what is the impact of that on their loved ones? Not just if they actually got seriously ill or died, but just the anxiety, the worry that you place, the pressure you place on your relationships when you're doing that kind of work. And it's a particular issue. It's brought into focus by the colleagues of mine that work for organizations like Médecins Sans Frontières. They are doing very challenging work under fire in active war-torn zones, and the many military groups actively target health infrastructure, and they are a constant threat of kidnap, and they're just trying to deliver medical care, but the risk to them as individuals is very, very significant on an ongoing basis, and they're the people I'm in awe of, that they're able to manage that and also somehow communicate that to their loved ones so that they can make that work with their family and their relationships.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely staggering to have individuals who are who are so strong-willed, and their commitment to service is so strong that they will put themselves in harm's way, risk going under fire, risk kidnap, all of these things to provide healthcare for those that simply don't have access to it, which is, I think, something to be incredibly admired and applauded. With the work that that you've done in the past and what you've now seen, what are some of the biggest impacts that you think could be had from that work, and from the work that others are doing, that we could really benefit from, not just in the UK, but globally, through that work? What are some of the things that you have the sense on we could really change?
Yeah, from a kind of global health perspective, there's huge inequalities across the world, as we know, and with regards to healthcare provision, there's still this huge divide between the global north and the global south, and the quality of care we get, that doesn't feel like it sometimes in NHS. We're pretty lucky. When you go to some countries like Myanmar, where I spent 6 months, you realize just how and this is just to give you one example, this is a country that was under military rule for the 30 years before we entered into the country, and they've just fallen so far behind because there is no innovation, there is no sharing of knowledge. The training of their medics is very limited because there's very little contact with the outside world. Everything is controlled by the military. And so when we went in with the NGO to help, we essentially tried to do some capacity building work. So share some of the practices, some of the knowledge, some of the resource that we're beneficiaries from in a developed country with a country like that. And for me, that was an absolutely really formative experience, being part of that local community of other clinicians, and just how much they were so desperate for that kind of knowledge, and for us to kind of share some practices that we had developed over years in the NHS with them, so that they could improve the care to their patients. And also it's reciprocal. So we were learning things from them that we could then take back to the NHS. Of course, it's a two-way street. But I see that capacity building work where you send doctors or nurses, paramedics from well-resourced countries into settings of areas of need where those patients are massively underserved by the health system. And that can be the most meaningful, really, is building capacity. It's health infrastructure, it's training, it's system design. That they're the most sustainable kinds of intervention. But equally valid, really, is just providing frontline clinical support to those staff, and just being there on the ground. And I think that that's the kind of work I think is probably the most impactful, the most meaningful. And there's lots of organizations out there that will take medics from the UK and other well-resourced settings and find them opportunities to serve these underserved communities.
Yeah, and I think that creating that impact is incredible at scale that you can achieve it. And one of the questions that I had off the back of that was, because obviously there's a lot of concern around technological innovation and all of these things that are happening within the AI space and machine learning and LLMs and all of this sort of stuff that I think has massive applicability. I really see a pathway, and maybe this is naive optimism, I see a pathway from which those medical innovations hopefully would be able to trickle through and find their more clear red line through to these places as well, where you can create more sharing of innovation, more sharing of knowledge, and a true democratization of healthcare to create a lasting impact that's meaningful, and that these tools and technologies have a role to play in that as well.
I love the way you phrased that, Johnny. That really resonates with me, what you've just said there. Because a lot of the innovation we have in developed healthcare, we completely take for granted. And some very basic kind of principles and processes. One thing we worked on in Myanmar is just hand washing, hand hygiene. And that was an innovation that happened in the UK, but 100, 200 years ago, Ignaz Semmelweis, this was, back then it was innovative, but actually in some certain parts of the world, that things like that just aren't happening because the provision isn't there. And you can take something, an innovation as simple as some policies and processes to support staff to implement, say, hand hygiene practice in their health facility. And it's incredible the impact that can have on rates of infection and patient care. So yes, I think the sharing of not just high tech. We think of innovation very often as this very high tech thing about, you mentioned AI and things like that. And I think, yes, there is definitely a role for that to work its way into the global south. But also I think before we get there, we need to get some of the foundational those foundations of care right first. And some of that's the simplest stuff.
Yeah, taking it back to first principles. And I think the education piece is a huge one. I think we often forget, and I had a conversation yesterday, and this really became highlighted to me, that we take for granted the level of education that general population has. And in many cases is someone that may know a little bit. You may be in a very privileged position to know a great deal more than perhaps someone else might. So you expand that horizon out further into places like Myanmar and other places. As you say, it doesn't need to be this all singing, all dancing, tech whiz bang innovation. It can simply be just a little bit more education that can create, the ripples of change, where a real step change for many millions of people can be had, and that's a beautiful thing to be able to play a role in.
Yeah, it is. And with the Myanmar thing, we were out there during this narrow window where, so Aung San Suu Kyi had a democratically formed government. There was power sharing between her and the military junta, and NGOs and foreigners, as they're called, so non-Burmese people, were welcomed into the country, and there was this explosion of innovation within this country, and not just in the medical space, but in business, everything. And there was a real buzz, and the people that we lived and worked with were so excited, energized by this. Suddenly, they were having all these Westerners coming in and meeting them, and having all this cultural exchange, which was fascinating. But as many people have learned in the news, unfortunately, the junta wrestled back control almost overnight. There was, and we're very much back to this oppressive military regime, and it's not possible for us to continue doing that work in that country. And it's very sad. Part of me is very saddened, because I'd very much like to go back to Myanmar and continue that work. But we can offer some remote support, but I can't be boots on the ground anymore. But what I like, the way I console myself, is that you mentioned those ripples of change. You feel like I've been there, and I've been present in that environment, and hopefully that has inspired and helped other health workers that will then amplify the impact that we had there, and that will continue after we're gone. It all sounds a bit macabre. It's kind of like, when I'm dead, what will my legacy be? But you never underestimate the power of your presence in these environments, and how that, if you leave a positive footprint, how that continues well after you've gone, to leave a legacy of lasting positive change.
I love that you said that, Will, because I think too often now there's a view that, one person can't make a change, and therefore what's the point? And I think you've just beautifully summed up why it's incumbent upon everyone to play a role, because I think you can leave the world a better place than you found it, and it only takes one person, and that one ripple can spread, and then that changes the whole game for a whole bunch of people. And it's something that we should all aspire to do, and it's something that I think is well within our gift. And I'm very grateful that there are people in the world like yourself doing that work and continuing to do that work, and sacrificing so much of their own time, putting themselves in harm's way in some cases as well to do that. And so what's next for you? If you're enjoying the adventure with your two little ones, what is the future hold for yourself, and what are the aspirations that you have next, and what's the next chapter in your journey?
Thanks, Johnny. Well, I'll probably be able to tell you in more detail when I've actually finally got round to writing my little plan. There's loads of ideas swimming around my head, but I'm pretty sure, Jen, I think I've got undiagnosed ADHD. So I've got loads. My head is just this sea of ideas, and I'm a kind of pie in the sky kind of person, and so I have to kind of condense it. I have to focus those down into something if I'm going to move the needle. But I think the main thing I want to do is try and enter this kind of very crazy world of media and TV, but kind of with a purpose, with a mission. This whole story that we've talked about in this conversation so far, the story of these medics working in extreme environments, I am really just one small player in this much bigger community of people doing these interesting roles. I would love to see that story told, and I would like to bring that into the to public consciousness and change people's perception of what it means to be a health worker in 2024, and showcase the bravery and commitment of the professionals that I work with. So that's my next chapter, I think, is finding a way to do that. And do you know what's interesting, Johnny, is life is full of these little Everests, isn't it? You find yourself at the base of something. When I went to medical school, I looked up at the 5th years and I thought, how on earth am I going to get through all of these exams and get to where they are and become a junior doctor? And then you kind of somehow you fumble your way through it and you're there. And you've done that, and then you're at the base of another mountain. And the next thing for me was like being a foundation doctor, doing my GP training, did that, brilliant. And then I wanted to be an expedition medic, and I was like, okay, cool. So I'll try and do that. And then I got there, and then I was like, okay, I want to be like a media medic. And I was like, okay, and then got there. Now the next thing is like trying to, if you want to be, say, a TV presenter, or you want to somehow create factual content that may go on TV or some other kind of outlet. I'm at the stage now, at the beginning of another journey where I'm having to somehow reorientate myself, learn a whole new set of skills, build some new contacts, and I very much feel like I'm an apprentice in this next phase, and it's all very speculative. There's nothing tangible yet, but this is me making a little declaration publicly that this is something I'm going to try and do. And do you know what? The first step is just saying that you're going to do it, because that takes a bit of bravery and courage, doesn't it? And I think just being me just saying that to you now, that is the first step you take on any journey or adventure, isn't it?
It really is. And I absolutely have to say, speaking as someone that's spoken to you a few times and seeing you obviously having this conversation, you're a fantastic orator. You've got amazing passion. You describe things in a beautiful way. And it's clear how much this work means to you. So I have no doubt that someone else is going to see that, and you'll be able to get that opportunity to shine a light on this incredible work. And even on top of that, even just what you said about building to the next challenge and to the next challenge and to the next Everest, I think it is, it speaks so much to that unquenchable thirst for knowledge, for, the challenge and growth. Because, growth is and change can be painful, but it's necessary, and it means that we're moving in the right direction. That comes with uncertainty, it comes with learning opportunities, it comes with throwing ourselves into situations where we get to have conversations like this, where I am completely out of my depth compared to someone that knows as much as yourself, and yet I get to learn and absorb some of that amazing knowledge and get this exposure to things, and so I think that's that's an inspiration and something to be so admired in your pursuit and the way that you're going after things. So more power to you, man. I think it's absolutely incredible, and I really hope that more people get exposure to the work that you're doing, and that you're able to tell those stories for those individuals doing that amazing stuff.
Yeah, that's really kind of you to say that, Johnny. That's very, very nice to hear that. And I just want to say I'm very grateful as well to so far to have the experiences that I've had, thanks to World Extreme Medicine, Mark Hannaford, and the rest of the team that have put their faith in me and allowed me to work with this organization. And through that organization is how I've met all of these incredibly inspiring people that really, as an extrovert, are my furnace. They're the thing that I feed into this fire that then they just you see that thirst for knowledge, for that next thing to really kind of create something meaningful, to do something that you're proud of, to put something out there in the world that makes a positive footprint. That's what really drives me. And I'm so grateful to the people that give me the opportunity to be able to do that.
Well, I can't think of a better note to end things on. And Will, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, getting to find out a little bit more about yourself and the work that you're doing, and to hear the inspirational journey that you're on. I thoroughly recommend people check out more of that. So if they want to do so, where can they find you?
So it depends what you're interested in. If you're into little videos on how to do extreme medicine, then check out my Instagram. It's the.extreme.medic on Instagram. Equally, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Facebook as the.extreme.medic. Those are the best. But yeah, ping me a message. And if you're a health worker listening to this, and that World Extreme Medicine, we get this a lot, thinking that sounds so cool. I'm getting really fed up of being an FY2 doctor, being on strike all the time, and I'm getting a bit jaded and disillusioned. And you're thinking, oh, come on, there must be something else out there. Then please reach out to me, and I will try and do my best to point you in the right direction, or at the very least, try and remind you that there is an infinite world of possibility and opportunity out there. And it's there to be taken.
Incredible. Well, infinite worlds of possibility and opportunity sounds like a fantastic thing to be involved in. We hope that you found this inspirational, informative, and please do like and subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching this. It's all that's left for me to say is goodbye from us, and we'll continue the amazing work that you're doing. Thanks for tuning in.